Hi, in this video series I'm going to show you how to UV unwrap a building. We're going to then take it into Photoshop, and this time instead of hand painting we're going to go ahead and use actual photographic textures to texture it. So first you're going to start off by going to Schoology and going into the UV unit folder and looking for the UV building.blend file. So I'll go ahead and select it, right click, save link as, and I'll save it to my desktop. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to set up my project. So I'm going to make a new folder called UV Building, and this is where I'm going to drag and drop my building, and I'll also be able to store my textures inside there. Alright, I'll go ahead and open up the building, and as you can see here it's a real simple kind of urban building, kind of a little bit of a factory. Not terribly pretty at all, but we're going to make it look much nicer with the textures that we start to add on. So this blend file consists of three objects: a ladder, the building itself, and then the ground plane, and we'll be texturing all of them. So first thing we need to do is we need to unwrap the building. So I'm going to change my second window over here into a UV image editor. I'm going to press the letter T, and that gets rid of that toolbar there, so I have a little more visibility. I'm then going to go ahead and I'm going to get into edit mode on the building. I'm going to select all, and I could go at this with seams, by marking seams, but generally nowadays I always try to do the UV Smart Project and see how well that turns out, and if it's good enough, then that's it. I don't have to do seams at all, and that saves me a lot of time. Alright, so I'm going to press U to unwrap, Smart UV Project, and the only thing you have to worry about here is the island margin. I'm going to click that twice and give it a value of 0.06. Press OK, and let's take a look at our unwrap. So a couple of considerations. Now, when I bring this into Photoshop, it would be nice if I could go ahead and have these faces here be completely horizontal as opposed to vertical. But it really doesn't matter. We're going to be working a lot with layers, and layers can be flipped and rotated and scaled and all that kind of good stuff. So I don't think it matters too much. The most important thing is that you know what is what. So let's figure out how to do that. So in my 3D window, I'm going to press Control Tab, and I'm going to get into face mode. And then I'm going to deselect all. And when I deselect all, now you'll see that if I select a face, it will then show me the face over here. But it would be really nice to just be able to actually see all of my islands over here without having to select them. So if you press all, that's great, you can see them all, but now if I go ahead and let me switch over to face mode over here, so now if I select this face here, it highlights, but it doesn't tell me which face it is over here on the left hand side. So what I need to do is I need to turn on the sync feature. So I'm going to deselect all, and down here at the bottom of my UV window, there's this little tiny button here called the In Sync button. And when I do that and I activate that, you'll see that now, even though I have nothing selected, I can see it all over here. And the great thing about doing this is that now I can select a face over here and it shows me what it is. So I now know that this is the concrete roof of the building. If I go ahead and I click here, I know that that's the back side of the building. And this, of course, is the front side. This is the door, so that's a real important one. This is the window, so that's also a real important one. And you get the idea. So this is my personal way of working. I like to work like this. And I'll leave Blender open while I'm in Photoshop, so that way if I don't know what something is, I can just check back in. Okay, so I'm going to leave the layout like this, and I'm going to go ahead and I need to export it now. So I'm going to press A to select all. I'm going to come down here to my UVs menu and choose Export UV Layout. So it's going to automatically save it excuse me, into my UV building folder. I like to go ahead and rename the name just so it makes a little bit more sense. And I'm going to go ahead and call this Unwrap. Now before I actually hit save, I want this model to be a really nice quality texture. I don't want the textures to be pixelated or grainy. So I'm going to come down here to the bottom left hand corner, and right down here it says ping and it says the size. Now 1024 by 1024 is a good, decent overall size, but I want to go ahead and get quite a bit more quality out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and double these numbers to 248 by 248. Okay, and with that said, it's now double the size, and now I can hit export UV layout. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to now open up Photoshop and bring in and do File Open and open up my Unwrap. And there it is there. Okay, so here are all my islands, and now I can start downloading textures and then bringing them in and then flipping them and getting them all set up. So the first thing I'm going to do before I start getting textures is I'm going to rename this layer, and I'm going to call it UVs. And I think I'll probably go ahead and lock it just so nothing happens to it. And I'm going to be working quite a bit with layers, so I want to save this. Instead of a ping file, I want to save it as a Photoshop file, and that's so all of my layers can stay intact. So I'm going to do a quick file save as. I'm going to navigate to my desktop and find my folder. So here I am, UV Building. And then I'm going to change the format from ping to Photoshop. And there we go. There it is, PSD. I'll hit save. And now I can go ahead and start making layers. Now we're not going to hand paint. Remember, that's not the focus of this tutorial. The focus is to get some textures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go online, open up a new tab here, and I could, and I'm not going to demo this in the video because it'll take up extra time, but basically if I go ahead and I type in something like brick texture, notice it's texture, not textures, I'm going to find a bunch of really good ones here. The problem though is that these bricks are going to need to be scaled down from their normal size. And what's going to happen is when they're scaled down, I want the bricks to look like a realistic texture. I want them to be a realistic size. So you have to think of what's called texture scale. How big is the texture? And when I scale these down, it means they're going to have to be repeated. So what I'm going to need is I'm going to need, on this building here, I'm going to need probably 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll probably have about 8 or 9, maybe 10 different brick textures. And so if I take any of these here, unfortunately the left side does not match up with the right side. And you can sort of see on this one, there's kind of a brown, dark brown brick on the left-hand side, and there's not one on the right-hand side. So if this texture repeats or tiles itself, you'll see it. And it will look really ugly in the game world or in your 3D rendering. So instead of typing in brick texture, it's a good idea to type in seamless brick texture. You can also type in tileable bricks texture, but seamless and tileable mean the same thing. Okay, so if you mouse over any of these images, you'll see the size and you'll see the dimensions down here. And basically, the larger the size, the higher resolution, the higher the quality of the texture is going to be. So I would say stay away from smaller ones like this one here is 250 by 250. That's really small. So if you can get ones that are in the high hundreds or even bigger into the thousands, you're going to get some nice quality. I like this one here, and it's 2048 by 2048. This is a really good website called maxtextures.com. You can't go wrong with that. And of course, if you find other brick textures, and there's some really nice ones here, but we don't know if these other ones are if they tile. But you can see down here it says tiles horizontally and vertically. That's awesome. When you find a website that says that they will tile horizontally or vertically or both, that's a find. Bookmark that site right away. You can see this cool one here that I really like. It unfortunately won't tile vertically because of that big stuff down at the bottom of the concrete there, even though it is very cool. Okay, so this one's pretty cool too. You can see it's more rectangular. I'm going to go ahead and go with the one that brought me here, and that is this one here. So the most important thing when downloading a texture is you want to make sure that it's not taken at an angle. There's no perspective on it. It needs to be taken straight on. Second thing you need to do is you want to make sure that you download the actual big texture itself. Don't download a preview or a thumbnail of the texture. So keep clicking on View Image and basically find the big giant version of it. So this is it here. I'm going to go ahead and right click, Save Image As, and I'm going to put it inside my UV building folder, and I'll just call this Brick Texture a 1 because I might download another one later, but that's good for now. Okay, so that's my brick texture. So now I'm going to go ahead and get the door texture and the window texture and then asphalt texture. So I'm going to go ahead and do seamless asphalt texture. And for the asphalt texture or the concrete texture, you can pretty much get away with something pretty simple. I'm going to use this one here. It's 1600 by 1600. It might not be as dark as I want it to be, but the cool thing is that I can go ahead and I can change the color inside Photoshop, and I'll show you how to do that later on, probably in part 2. Okay, so that's my asphalt texture, and it's tileable, or it's seamless, so I'll be able to do that. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and type in door texture. Now this is kind of an abandoned building. It's kind of a factory industrial building, so I want the door to reflect that. I'm not going to choose any of these doors here that really look like residential doors. I think I'm going to go ahead and go with the full-size image of this door here. It's pretty nice. There were some others on this website though that are pretty good. So you'll have some other finds here. I'm going to go ahead and just stick with this one for now. I think it'll work. So I'll save it and just call it industrial door. And there we are. Okay, what else do I need? Oh, I need the window. So I'm going to go ahead and type in factory door texture. And I found, this was a student suggested, oops, not door texture, sorry, window. Student suggested using the search word factory, and it came up with some brilliant ones here. So a lot of these are paid textures, like this one here is paid, and it has a logo or decal on it, so you want to be real careful about that. So again, I'm kind of looking at textures here. That one's not bad. That one's a paid one. It's a paid one, unfortunately. Some of these are just really too small. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so I can just find one that I think looks good, and then I'll pick up from where I left off. Okay, so I'm back. So I finally decided on this one. It's going to need a little bit of editing because you can see that there's a row of windows here, and then the second row below it doesn't quite show it, all of it, and there's a little bit on the top. So I'm going to trim this and sort of cheat a little bit, and I'll just use this completed row here and here, and then I'll scale it if necessary, and that'll also show you guys some good tricks here, I think. So we'll call this factory window. All right, good. I think I'm all set for textures. I've got the main 4 textures: the window, the door, the asphalt for the ground and the roof, and the main brick texture. What I don't have is I don't have a one for the ladder yet. But everything that I show you with the building and the ground would be able to teach you just enough to be able to do it. So, all right, let's get into how we do this. So, I think what I'm going to do is this video is taking a little bit of time. So, in interest of keeping you not from falling asleep, I'm going to go ahead and make a part 2, and that's where I will go ahead and I'll start bringing in the textures and start editing them. So, I will see you in part 2.